Thanks for joining, everyone. My name is Felix. I'm a sample management associate at Crux Biolabs. In this presentation, I will talk about how we manage our samples using LabKey Sample Manager. So let's get started. First, just a little bit background of us. Our lab was founded in 2011, originally focusing on producing ELISA kits for academic research sector. In 2017, we rebranded as Crux Biolabs and began expanding our client base to include biotech and pharmaceutical companies. By 2018, we had expanded our services to clinical trial support, adding PBMC processing and flow cytometry. In 2019, we achieved NATA ISO 17025 accreditation, further strengthening our commitment to quality. And in 2020, we moved into a larger facility and shifted our primary focus toward supporting clinical trial pipelines. And most recently, in 2023, we introduced analytical chemistry services for pharmacokinetics, and also our immunoassay work was upgraded to GCLP accreditation. So as our company expanded, we had a couple of challenges that really slowing us down in terms of sample management. The first challenge we had is insufficient file management. So previously, we were using Excel spreadsheet to manage all the samples, which is fine when we were smaller, but when our projects is getting more complicated and the number of samples increased, Excel spreadsheet started to show some disadvantages. A typical example will be each project has their own sample tracking log in an Excel file, and each file may have multiple tabs for different sample types or storage boxes. So if you want to look for sample information or solve any location discrepancies, you will need to jump back and forth between the files and tabs to search information or to verify some errors, which is very time consuming and really easy to make mistakes. And plus we have to be really careful with all the formulas and the formats because you don't want to ruin the whole thing by overwriting some cells. The second challenge is that tracking sample storage manually was very time consuming and messy. Again, with our old method, every time a sample was added, we had to type in the sample information, copy and paste them into a page that has all the formula so that the sample information can be transferred to the box layout page. And not to mention that in the formula page, we can only transfer one row at a time. Then you will need to go back and repeat the process again. And also searching samples can be painful. If you were given a list of samples, we had to search the sample ID one at a time, record the location, and move on to the next one. Security and data integrity also became even more important as our team grew bigger. For example, when multiple people were updating the same file at the same time, it was quite easy to have conflicted versions. And because there is very limited traceability in Excel spreadsheets, so when you're verifying those versions, it's difficult to find out who made the changes, when the changes were done, or what has been changed. And finally, our sample status tracking was very basic. Once the samples are entered into the spreadsheet, it was hard to see a sample's journey from receipt through processing and shipment. So people use different ways to flag the sample statuses as well. Some people prefer using a comment, and other people like to use highlighting the samples with different colors. And this inconsistent status tracking made it difficult for the team to quickly understand where each sample was in its workflow. So all these challenges added up and really pushed us to look for a smarter system. And that's when LabKey came in. So the first thing that LabKey helped us is to centralize all our samples and projects. After implementing LabKey, we created a clear workflow to organize all the incoming samples based on the type of service. So for example, if a sample arrives and need to be processed at Crux, we will log it under bioanalytical fresh. And then the sample will be further derived into either PBMC fresh, which is only for PBMC samples only, or fresh, which is for any other sample types like plasma, ctDNA, or supernatant. On the other hand, if the sample was already processed somewhere else and is sent to us, we will log it either bioanalytical frozen if the sample is going to be further analyzed at Crux, or frozen if we are just storing the samples temporarily and ship it to another lab in the future. And this structure has become the foundation of how we manage all our samples, and it's the basic logic behind how we use LabKey day to day. We're also using LabKey to store all our sponsors, projects, and protocols and link them to each sample. So instead of creating separate files for each project, we use LabKey's filter function to find all the samples that belong to a specific project. Or if you click on any project, you can see how many samples have been received so far. Secondly, LabKey allows us to map the storage unit down to the box level. So when we're storing the samples, we don't need to manually assign the rows and columns for each sample because the system will automatically allocate the samples to the next available position in the box. And also within the box, we have the options to arrange the placement. So samples can be stored in ascending or descending order, or the box can be filled with different directions. It also let us to customize the box sizes, whether you're using a standard format like 9x9, or you can customize your own boxes to match your preferences. Another feature I really like is the flexibility in viewing the storage information. So one option is to view the list of the box locations along with its rows and columns, which is quite useful when, for example, when you're working with multiple samples across different boxes. The other is the visual box view, allowing you to quickly spot any specific samples within the box. And we often use these two views for example, random spot checking or sample consolidation, which really saved us a lot of time in searching the boxes in the samples. Thirdly, LabKey allows to set different access levels for each department, so we can control what permission each team has regarding the samples. So for example, as part of the sample management team, I have the editor access for both samples and storage. So I can add, update, or delete the samples, as well as managing the storage unit and the box layouts. But for other teams, because they're not involved so much in sample registration, shipment, or storage, they're only given access to view and update sample information. So in order to reduce the risk of samples or storage unit being accidentally deleted or modified. We also create different folders to separate our main lab and partner labs. So in each lab or in each folder, you can set your own source types and sample types, and they are isolated from other folders. So unless you are given the permission, you will not have the visibility or access to any samples registered in other folders. And this feature helped us to centralize data without compromising confidentiality. And finally, we use LabKey to assign different statuses to each sample, ensuring that every sample can be tracked at any stage. So at Crux, we use available to indicate that a sample is ready to be processed or used or is currently in storage. And once the sample has been handled by our operators, we will change the status to processed or consumed, depending on the type of service. Also, we will mark the sample as shipped if we dispatch them to another lab. And we also added shipment in progress in the middle to indicate that the samples are being prepared for shipment to avoid any double up works. If a sample is discarded, we will sign it to destroyed. And if a sample is on hold and awaiting further instructions, we will lock the sample to prevent any accidental updates or movements. So to better show how a sample moves through the lab using LabKey, I have a quick example here. When we receive a sample, the first thing we do is to register it onto LabKey. So at this point, we carefully cross-check and record all the key sample information like the site number, requisition number, subject ID, collection date and time, etc. And once all the information is recorded, our lab team can then move on to processing. Once the sample is processed, our lab team will then enter the key processing data and derive the aliquots from it. So in this example, the parent sample was processed and derived into 4 PBMC aliquots, and their processing details are recorded in the grid. So it's quite important to point out that some information is entered at the parent sample level, while other details are recorded for each individual aliquot. So for example, the data like the experiment ID, analyst, the cell counts are the same for all the aliquots. So when we are deriving, LabKey let us to pass this shared information down automatically. So we only need to enter it once, and no matter how many aliquots we're making. On the other hand, the details like freezing concentration, the vial volume can vary between the aliquots. So these data are entered separately for each one to make sure that our records stay accurate. And the reason we pull all the data into one single table is to give us a clear overview of the sample details without having to switch back and forth between the parent and daughter records. This also makes it much easier for our QA team and project managers to quickly find and retrieve information they needed to do cross-checking or the data transfer for our clients. Once processing is completed, the aliquots are ready for storage in either a -80-degree freezer or in liquid nitrogen for long-term preservation. So what we do is we select the samples from the list, choose the storage location, and set the placement order. And then LabKey will automatically assign each sample to the next available position in the box. Then we store the physical samples in the physical boxes and make sure that the box layout line up with what we have in LabKey. On a side note, we can also track the full timeline of every sample because LabKey keeps a detailed log of everything that happens to each sample, right from when it's first registered to when it goes into storage, to any updates or whenever it's moved to a new location. And this feature is quite handy, especially when we want to, for example, backtrack the time of some actions or solve some discrepancies by comparing with the previous data. And finally, when samples are ready to be shipped out to another lab or client, we use LabKey's workflow function to organize and track the whole process. So once the shipment list is confirmed, our lab team can, or our sample management team can bulk select the samples and create a job. Each job can be broken down into individual tasks, like booking the courier, preparing the manifest, or cross-checking the samples. And we can assign each task to different team members and also set due dates and priorities. And then as each task is completed, it gets marked off in the system, and LabKey will send an email reminder to the next person in line to keep everything moving until the shipment is finished. And another great thing is that every step and action is automatically recorded in LabKey. So we always have a clear record of who and when completed each step. And of course, once the samples are dispatched, we will change their status to shipped, and the samples will be automatically removed from our storage. We're also starting to use LabKey for more than just tracking samples. Right now, we are working on setting it up to help manage reagents and schedule poisons, things that need extra careful handling and really detailed record keeping. We're also using LabKey to record helpful details like the manufacturer, the catalog number, the batch number, or expiry dates to replace all the handwritings so that we won't have to rely so much on the paper or the spreadsheet logs. We also want to log every time a reagent is used or aliquoted, including exactly how much was taken, how much was left, and who used it, which give us clear record of usage, especially for these regulated materials. So to quickly sum up, since we started using LabKey Sample Manager, we really simplified our workflow. Data transfer to client are a lot clearer and more reliable now, and we've seen a big drop in mistakes and confusions. We're also looking ahead to continuing to expand how we use LabKey. For example, we're starting to manage reagents and schedule poisons in the system. That's helping us improve our efficiency, our accuracy, and reliability of our data. And overall, LabKey has made a real difference in how smoothly our lab runs, and we are excited to keep building on that. Also, at the end, I would like to give a special thank you to Hannah and Lance and the entire LabKey team, because you guys have been there for us from the very beginning, offering guidance and being patient, solving all the problems we had. So we really appreciate all your support. And that is all I want to share. Thank you for everyone for your attention.
Thank you so much, Felix. We really appreciate it. That was a fantastic presentation. So thank you. Again, we can't thank you enough. And as all of you folks kind of have questions for Felix or for LabKey itself, please feel free to drop them in the chat and the Q&A. While you do that, I'm going to just do a very quick demonstration of Sample Manager so you can kind of see a lot of those features that Felix was describing live. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to kind of just dive into it really fast. But as I'm doing that, get your questions in and we'll do our best to answer them. So as Felix was kind of going through the system, you'll kind of see some differences, right? This isn't their actual system. This is what we use for demos, and this is kind of more clinical based. But this is going to be your home screen. So you'll have a basic overview of all of your different sample types. So you can see their statuses, like they were kind of doing in Crux, where you can see if they're available, if consumed, shipped, if they're being shipped, everything that's kind of going on. You have all of your recently used storage inventory boxes. So if you're pulling a sample out to aliquot and you want to put it back in, you can quickly get to that box you're just using. You have those workflow tasks. So those are the jobs that you're assigned, and you can see exactly where they are on that home page. And then you have electronic lab notebooks. So if you need to keep track of experimental notes or replace any paper records, they're kind of just here on the home screen. And as Felix was saying, this kind of helps centralize the data so you can have as many different source types as you need. Sources are usually things like where the samples are coming from. It provides more context of them. Usually it's something like a sample where the patients that samples were drawn from, studies that they're a part of, CROs and whatnot. You have your sample types, which are those physical items that you're really working with. You have your assays or the tests you're running on samples, and then you have those storage units. And this is also how you partition data. So we also have folders to make sure that you can have all the information in one system, but again, not compromise a lot of that confidentiality. When you go into a sample type, you have a bunch of different columns that you can have, and you really customize these to match exactly what it is that you need. And you can filter through all of these different columns of data to make sure you have the information you want to capture with your samples. Every single sample type can have unique data that you're capturing. So we really work to make sure that you can get all of the information that you need. Um, and like Felix said, you can also have different ways of viewing where these samples are stored. You can have it in these grid items, or if you click On that storage location, we're also going to bring you to a box map so you can see in multiple ways how these samples are related to each other. And as you kind of hover around, you can see where these samples are, more context if they're available, what sample tube type they are. So we really try to make it easy for folks to understand everything that they have. From there, I'm just going to search one of my favorite blood samples because I know it has a nice lineage view. But this is kind of how we track how these samples are related to each other, right? So we're not just tracking storage, we're tracking its life cycle and its relationships. So we can see that this blood sample was drawn from this specific mouse and that this specific mouse came from this specific study. But then I can see all its aliquots or its derivatives if we're going to different sample types and one easy to kind of view system. And so that's a lot of data that you're capturing, right? You're capturing storage, metadata, lineage relationships. Sometimes you're even going to be capturing test results so you can kind of see how things may be changing over time. If you're doing a study or if you're testing patients multiple times, you can check that. But one thing we really want to do is audit that data because if things are going in and out of the system, you want to know who registered it, what changes they're making, when they've made those changes, and what updates they're making, right? So we want to have a central access to that information. And we have those timelines on specific samples because usually you're missing one sample, right? One goes missing in the freezer, you don't know where it is, you need to look at that audit page. So every single sample has its unique audit log, but we do also have a system-wide audit log, and so you can view all of the changes going on all at once. Um, so this is very fast information, but it's kind of fun to kind of see how the system works live. And then one other thing I kind of want to pull, because Felix kind of brought it up, where they're starting to put in lot numbers and expiration dates, is that we have Sample Finder. And this is a fantastic tool to do very powerful searches across all of your samples. And you can look for all of your samples that might be expiring in the next 7 days. Maybe you have samples that were part of a test kit and maybe that test kit had something wrong with its lot, right? You need a way to quickly pull all of the samples that would be impacted by a recall test kit. So this is a great way to do that. I always like to show I want to find all my samples from a patient with a certain diagnosis, or in this case, I want to find all my samples from a mouse that has a bulb C strain. I just did this quick search and now I have thousands of samples to work through instead of me having to kind of go through all my Excel sheets trying to find them. So again, this was a very fast demo of Sample Manager. We're more than happy to do a slower version that kind of meets what your needs are, or kind of meet one-on-one. But hopefully that kind of gave folks enough time to get their questions in. So let's kind of go ahead and go through the questions. Let me just kind of pull up our questions and our Q&As really fast. Let's see. So, let me kind of pull them up. So sorry. Okay, and then let me close that. All right, Felix. So some of the questions that we have, how did your team adapt to using the software and what helped make that transition smoother?
Uh, yeah, so we our strategy is to roll out the software in stages. So in our first training session, we kind of introduce only the basic functions like how would you log a sample, how would you put them into storage and check them out from the storage. And then later on, based on each team's special needs, we gradually introduce some more functions like how do you derive samples into aliquots and how do you create a pick list and do kind of stuff. So yeah, that's our strategy and works pretty well. So once you realize how convenient that LabKey can do all kinds of stuff, you are more willing to learn and discover this software.
And then were there any unexpected benefits after moving to the system?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for us is the workflow function, because and we mainly use it for shipment right now. So in average, we have about like 7 shipments to organize every week, and each job require different has special requirements and different documentation and stuff like that. So it's quite important to keep track of everything and make sure every step is done before the deadline. And especially if you are working with a team, you also need to make sure that everyone's on track. So workflow is a perfect tool for us to keep track of everything, and then you just need to mark it off from the system once you complete it. So yeah, so our biggest surprise is workflow function.
Cool. Um, are you planning on any integrations with, I guess, like other instruments or other systems? Do you know if that's kind of on the books?
Uh, I'm not too familiar with the lab stuff,
Okay.
but yeah, I it's definitely on our schedule.
Okay, cool. And I will just say to that, we do have some folks that do want to integrate with other systems, whether it's other software, and we do have other folks that are looking at kind of looking at those instruments as well. So thank you for that question. And then what advice when you get to other labs that are considering moving away from spreadsheets or other systems? Is there anything that they should look for in a software that you kind of wish Crux knew?
Uh, my advice is that because LabKey is really giving you a platform to help you centralize all the data and give you all the flexibility to design your own structure to suit your lab. And so, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is the more time you spend or you invest in the initial setup, the more benefit you can get in the long run. So yeah, that's my advice.
Cool. All right. If there are other questions, please feel free to kind of drop them in the chat. But thank you again so much, Felix, for kind of joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Um, and then I know if we do get other questions after this, I'll be sure to kind of send them your way, Felix. Feel free to kind of
Yeah, not
email
a
us.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Email us questions if you have them. My email is on the screen, lancel@labkey.com. I can kind of field them over to Felix or try to answer them myself. But thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Felix, and everyone at Crux.